My entitled wife disappeared after a girls' trip, and years later, she showed up at my doorstep with a baby. So I destroyed her life. You know how people always say, "I never saw it coming"? That's exactly how it was for me. My wife and I had been together for 4 years, married the entire time. I genuinely believed we had something solid. We had plans, a whole future mapped out, and for the most part, I thought we were completely on the same page. One of the biggest things we talked about was having kids. Or at least I thought we both wanted that. Right after we got married, we started seriously discussing it. She used to talk all the time about wanting 2 or 3 kids, what we'd name them, how we'd decorate the nursery, everything. She'd even spend time online looking at baby clothes and gadgets, planning out this life with our future children. It became our thing, something that brought us closer. So yeah, we were excited, ready to start that next chapter. Everything felt perfect. But then we got hit with news that completely knocked the wind out of me. After a few months of trying without success, we went to see a doctor. Long story short, the problem was me. My count was way too low, and the doctor basically said the chances of us having kids naturally were slim to none. Felt like a punch to the gut. I felt useless. All those plans we'd made just disappeared in an instant. It hit me hard, really hard. I ended up in a pretty dark place for a while. Therapy helped eventually, but in the beginning I was a complete mess. First, she seemed supportive. She told me it didn't matter, that she'd be happy with just the 2 of us. But even then, something about it felt off. Like she moved on from it way too quickly. One minute she was dreaming about baby names, and the next she was saying she didn't need kids at all. Now, I get it. People can change their minds. But this felt different. Her whole attitude shifted. She stopped talking about kids altogether, avoided the topic completely. And it wasn't just that. It felt like she started seeing me differently too. Out of nowhere, she began making small digs at me. Things she'd never said before. Comments about how I wasn't taking care of myself, how maybe I should get in better shape, or be more productive around the house. Yeah, I'd gained a bit of weight, but it felt like she was suddenly looking for reasons to blame me. When I confronted her and asked what was going on, she brushed it off, said I was imagining things, that I was being overly sensitive. But I knew something wasn't right. The woman I married, the one who used to sit with me for hours talking about our future, she was different. Not openly mean, but distant, cold, like she'd already checked out and was just going through the motions. Over time, I guess I started believing her when she said everything was fine. I stopped pushing. I didn't want to come off as insecure or needy, so I let it go. Fast forward a few years and we were just existing, living day by day. We barely talked about anything meaningful anymore. It felt like we were roommates instead of husband and wife. I tried bringing up other options, adoption, surrogacy, but every time she shut it down, said she didn't want to think about it. She'd say, "I'm happy as long as we're together." But honestly, I never fully believed her. It always felt like she was trying to convince herself more than me. Then, out of nowhere, she told me she wanted to go on a girls' trip. That wasn't unusual. She'd gone on trips with her friends before, and I'd always supported her. We were living in Brighton, and she'd been talking for a while about wanting to go to America with them. I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think twice about it. We'd built trust over the years, so I even helped her pack, made sure she had everything she needed, and dropped her off at the airport. I still remember the last thing she said before she left. She turned to me and said, "Thank you for being so supportive." At the time, it felt a little strange. It's not like I'd done anything out of the ordinary, but she seemed so sincere that I just brushed it off, thinking she was being appreciative. That night, I stayed up so I could call her once she landed, just to make sure everything went smoothly. Her flight was supposed to take about 9 hours, so I kept myself busy around the house, watching TV, checking the clock, waiting for her message saying she'd arrived. When I saw that her flight had landed, I called her. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. I figured she was just tired. Maybe she'd gone straight to the hotel and crashed. So I didn't think too much of it. But then morning came, and I still hadn't heard from her. That's when this uneasy feeling started creeping in. This knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I tried calling again. Then I sent a few texts, thinking maybe she was busy or her phone was on silent. Hours went by. Still nothing. At that point, I was officially freaking out. I called her sister, hoping maybe she'd heard from her. Nothing. Now I was really panicking. I even started calling her friends, the ones who were supposed to be on the trip with her. I thought maybe something had happened to her phone, or she just hadn't had a chance to check in. But when I called them, they were confused. Because they weren't on any trip. They were sitting 2 blocks away, back home, having coffee. That's when it hit me. She wasn't on a girls' trip. She wasn't with her friends. She hadn't gone anywhere with anyone. She was just gone. I sat there holding the phone, and it felt like my stomach dropped through the floor. Couldn't wrap my head around it. Why would she lie to me like that? Why would she just leave without saying anything? I tried to convince myself it was some kind of mistake. Maybe she missed a connecting flight. Maybe there was an emergency and she couldn't call. But deep down, I knew she had planned this. The whole girls' trip. The way she thanked me for being supportive. It was all part of whatever she'd been planning. I didn't know what to do. It felt like I was stuck in some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. This wasn't the woman I married. This was someone I didn't even recognize. And then everything started to make sense. The coldness, the way she stopped talking about our future, those little jabs about my looks and my health. She'd been pulling away for a long time. I just didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. That night, I sat there staring at my phone, hoping for something. A text, a call, anything. But nothing came. And deep down, I knew it wouldn't. The next morning, I just lay there staring at the ceiling, hoping maybe it had all been some messed up dream. But her side of the bed was empty, and reality hit hard. She had actually left. She packed her bags and vanished. All those reassurances I'd given myself the night before, that maybe she was delayed, maybe her phone died, they didn't hold up anymore. It was obvious. She had planned this. She wanted out. The first few days I was in complete denial. I kept calling her phone, hoping I'd hear her voice, hoping she'd explain everything. I even left messages. Half the time I didn't even know what to say. But I kept leaving them anyway, hoping something would get through to her. All I got back was silence. And somehow that made it even worse. It felt like I'd been left alone to figure everything out, with no clue what went wrong. Like I'd been a stranger to her all along. At first, her family was just as shocked as I was. Her mom had no idea about any of this. They hadn't heard from her either. I started going over there a lot, trying to find answers. Talking to her mom again and again, hoping something would make sense. I think they felt bad for me. Her mom would let me stay over some nights. She even cooked for me when I couldn't bring myself to do it. She'd sit there and listen while I talked, going over every little thing that didn't add up, trying to piece together how my whole life had fallen apart without any warning. And honestly, sometimes, I'd just sit there in silence, too numb to even speak. I went through waves of everything: anger, sadness, guilt. I kept asking myself what I did wrong. Did I miss something? Did I not give her enough attention? There were days I'd replay every conversation we ever had, every argument, trying to figure out what pushed her to leave. I kept thinking about what I could have done differently, how I might have saved our marriage. I know it sounds dramatic, but I became obsessed with finding an answer. Like if I could just figure it out, somehow everything would make sense. Maybe even feel fixable. But it never did. I barely ate, barely slept. My work started slipping too. People noticed. They'd ask if I was okay, and I'd just brush it off. Say I was dealing with some personal stuff. The truth? I was embarrassed. Saying it out loud. That my wife had left me without a word. Felt humiliating. Eventually, I told a couple of close friends. They tried their best to help, dragging me out to hang out, keeping me distracted, trying to get me to move on. But even when I was with them, I wasn't really there. I'd be stuck in my own head, thinking about her, where she was, what she was doing, and why I wasn't enough to make her stay. One of the worst parts was dealing with people who had no idea what had happened. Neighbors, family, old co-workers. They'd ask things like, "How's married life?" Or "How's your wife?" Every single time, it felt like ripping off a fresh scab. I didn't have the courage to tell them the truth. So I'd smile and say everything was fine. But that lie got heavier every time I said it. In the end, therapy was the only thing that really helped. I'd never gone before, but after a few months of barely functioning, I knew I couldn't keep going like that. So I found a therapist and started going every week. Talking to someone neutral, someone who didn't know either of us, didn't carry any of that history, it helped more than I expected. I let everything out. The anger, the betrayal, that empty space she left behind. I talked about the sleepless nights, how I'd lie awake replaying everything over and over again. And slowly, the therapist helped me see something I hadn't been able to accept. There wasn't some magical moment where I could have saved it. She made a choice to leave. And that was on her, not me. That was a hard pill to swallow. For a long time, I believed something was wrong with me, that I had somehow pushed her away. But little by little, I started seeing things more clearly. She'd been distant for a long time, cold, checked out, and I ignored it, hoping things would somehow fix themselves. I convinced myself that if I just tried harder, it would be enough to hold everything together. It wasn't, and accepting that hurt, but it also helped me move forward. As time passed, I started taking small steps to rebuild my life. I didn't realize how much of myself I'd lost in that marriage until she was gone. I'd always been the one putting in effort, going out of my way to make sure she was happy, making sure our home felt right. But now, suddenly, I had all this time, and no idea what to do with it. So I started picking up old hobbies again, things I'd forgotten about. I started going to the gym, reading books I'd been putting off, even trying out new recipes. Work got better too. At first, I was just going through the motions, barely keeping up. But as I started feeling more like myself again, I put more energy into it. It became one of the few things that made me feel in control, like I still had something going for me. I'd always been good at what I did, but this time, I gave it everything. The extra hours, the focus. And it paid off. I got a promotion I probably wouldn't have earned if I'd stayed stuck in that same place. Still, there were days that hurt. Every now and then, I'd come across something that reminded me of her. A photo, an old movie ticket, little things that brought back memories I tried to forget. I'd catch myself wondering what she was doing, if she ever thought about me, if she ever regretted what she did. But those moments started fading. Bit by bit, it got easier. Each time, I was able to pack those memories away a little faster, move on a little more. I also reconnected with friends I hadn't really seen since I got married. We started doing things again, going to the golf range, hiking, stuff I hadn't done in years. And honestly, it felt good to have people in my corner. People who weren't part of that mess. People who could help me move forward without looking back. I realized I had poured way too much of myself into that relationship, into being her husband. When she left, it felt like she took a part of me with her. Like I'd lost a huge piece of who I was. But slowly, piece by piece, I started finding myself again. It wasn't easy, and it definitely wasn't quick. But I was getting there. By the end of that year, I could finally look in the mirror and see someone who wasn't defined by what she'd done to me. I wasn't just the guy whose wife left him. I had survived. I had rebuilt. And I'd come out stronger. For the first time in years, I felt like I could actually live my life without her shadow hanging over me. And honestly, I was proud of that. I really thought I'd put everything behind me. Life had finally started to feel normal again, or at least as normal as it could be after everything. I had my routine. My friends kept me busy. Work was going well. I'd even stopped thinking about her every single day. Sure, there were still moments, random memories that would sneak up on me. But it wasn't like before, where everything in my life somehow led back to her. So when there was a knock on my door one Saturday morning, she was the last person I expected to see. But there she was, standing on my doorstep, holding a baby. I froze. My brain just stopped. Felt like I was seeing a ghost. She looked mostly the same, maybe a little more worn down, but still her. And then she gave me this look, like she actually thought I'd be happy to see her. That hit me harder than I expected, because I thought I was over it. I thought I didn't care anymore. But seeing her again stirred up emotions I thought I'd buried for good. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, staring. She smiled at me like nothing had ever happened. And then, without a hint of shame, she asked. Can I come in? The nerve. After everything she'd done, she just shows up like I'm supposed to welcome her back with open arms? Still, I kept my composure. I told her, no, you can stay right there and explain. I wasn't about to let her walk into my house and bring all that chaos back into the one place I'd rebuilt for myself. She looked a little thrown off, but she stayed where she was and jumped straight into her story. I know this might be a shock, she said, but I wanted to come back and explain everything. And she had this hopeful look on her face, like she genuinely believed I'd be open to hearing her out. Part of me wanted to laugh in her face. Another part wanted to slam the door right then and there. But mostly, I was curious. I needed to hear what excuse she had. What possible explanation could justify disappearing the way she did? She started talking about how she'd made a mistake leaving. How she realized she'd lost the best thing that ever happened to her. Her words, not mine. She said she'd spent a lot of time reflecting, and that after having the baby, she finally understood what really mattered in life. Apparently, what really mattered was showing up at my door unannounced after ghosting me for years. Then she looked down at the baby and said, "This is our second chance." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Our second chance? Like this kid was some kind of reset button. Like we could just pick up where we left off. I kept my face neutral, but inside, I was furious. She went on about how she wanted us to be a family again. That she'd made a terrible mistake, but now we could start fresh. The three of us. That's when I finally asked the one question that had been eating at me since the moment she showed up. Why did you leave? I kept my voice steady, but I could feel everything building underneath. I'd spent years trying to figure it out, going over every possibility, blaming myself, tearing myself apart. Now that she was standing in front of me, I needed the truth. She hesitated, looked down at her feet, like she was ashamed. But eventually, she said it. She admitted she left because she wanted a child. And since I couldn't give her one, she found someone who could. She said it so casually, like it was nothing, like she hadn't completely destroyed my life, like I was just supposed to accept it. She went on to explain that the guy she left me for didn't stick around. But by then, she already had the baby. And that's when she decided she wanted me back. Just like that. Simple as that. I took a moment to process what she was actually saying. Here she was, admitting that she'd abandoned me, run off with another guy, had his child, and now expected me to just accept it. Like I was supposed to forgive and forget. I looked at her and said, "So let me get this straight. You left me, found someone else, had his baby, and now you think you can come back and act like nothing happened?" She started crying, saying she was sorry, that she'd made a huge mistake. But honestly, it didn't move me at all. She kept going on about how she'd realized I was the one she truly loved, that we were meant to be together. It was hard to even keep a straight face. I couldn't believe how delusional she sounded. This wasn't love. This was desperation, and it was written all over her face. Then she tried to guilt-trip me. She started talking about how hard it had been being a single mom, how difficult her life was. Somehow, she managed to paint herself as the victim in all of this. Like her own choices hadn't led her exactly to where she was. She said she needed my support, that this time she was ready to make things work. And all I could think was, who does she think I am? I stood there listening, but at that point I was done. I told her plainly, "You made your choice a long time ago. Now you have to live with it. There's no second chance here." She looked stunned. Like the idea of me saying no had never even crossed her mind. Like she genuinely believed she could just walk back into my life because it was convenient for her. And just when I thought she'd finally understand and leave, she got angry. Her tone changed completely. She started yelling, calling me selfish, saying I owed her a chance to fix things. Then she said something that really showed who she was. She claimed that if she'd wanted to, she could have divorced me back then and taken half of everything. She even brought up the house, said it should still be hers. That's when it really hit me. Her true colors were right there in front of me. And strangely, I felt relieved. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't questioning anything. I finally saw her for who she really was. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her and said, "We're done. You wanted a different life, and now you have it. This isn't my responsibility anymore. And then I shut the door in her face, cut her off completely. Standing there, listening to her muffled shouting from the other side, I felt this unexpected calm wash over me. She could knock, yell, cry, whatever. I knew one thing for sure. I was never letting her back in. The woman I had loved, the one I married, she was gone. And in her place was a stranger who thought she could come back and pick up the pieces whenever it suited her. I walked away from the door and sat down, feeling lighter than I had in years. After I shut the door, I honestly thought that was it. I figured she'd get the message and leave. But no. Instead, she started banging on the door, yelling all kinds of things. I couldn't believe the audacity. There I was, in the one place that was mine, the one place I'd rebuilt after everything she'd put me through, and she was out there demanding I listen to her. At first, I considered just ignoring it. Let her yell until she got tired. But then, I got curious. I wanted to hear what kind of excuse she'd come up with this time. So I opened the door just a crack. Enough to show I was listening, but not enough to let her in. She looked stunned, like she'd just been slapped. Probably because I wasn't reacting the way she expected. And then she started again. She launched into this whole speech about how she was willing to forgive me for slamming the door on her, and how she was ready to start fresh. Like this was just some normal argument, not her abandoning me for years. She kept talking about how we could make things work if we both put in the effort. At that point, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I laughed, actually laughed, because the sheer nerve of this woman was beyond anything I'd ever seen. When I laughed, she looked furious, like I was supposed to feel bad for not taking her seriously. I told her, "You left. You had your chance and you threw it all away. I'm not going to pretend none of that happened just because you feel like it." Her face turned red, and she started going on about how I didn't understand how hard it had been for her. She talked about how lost she'd been after leaving, how she realized too late that she'd made a mistake. But I wasn't buying any of it. I told her straight up, leaving was a choice she made. She planned it, she lied about it, and then she followed through. Whatever regret she felt now didn't change anything. That's when she snapped. Her whole tone shifted. The sad, remorseful act disappeared, and she started going off on me, saying I was being unfair, that I didn't even have the decency to give her another chance. And then she said something that honestly blew my mind. She said, "If I'd wanted to, I could have taken everything from you back then. I could have taken half of everything you own." I just stood there, stunned. Here was a woman who had left me without a word, and now she expected credit for not trying to ruin me financially. Like that made her a good person. I looked at her and said, "So what? I'm supposed to be grateful? Grateful that you only ditched me and didn't take my stuff too?" She just stared at me, angry. But there was something else there too. Maybe desperation. Maybe guilt. Honestly, by that point, I didn't care. All those years I'd spent blaming myself, questioning everything, wondering if I was somehow responsible for her leaving. They just disappeared in that moment. I finally saw her for who she really was, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But she wasn't done. She started pacing back and forth on my porch, ranting about how I'd never find anyone like her, how I'd regret not giving her another chance. She actually tried to make it sound like I was the one missing out. It was bizarre. Here she was, the one who destroyed everything we had, acting like I should be begging her to stay. When she realized I wasn't going to budge, she got even louder. Then she tried to flip the blame onto me. She said I had forced her to leave, that if I had been more understanding about the whole situation with kids, none of this would have happened. According to her, my inability to give her a child meant I had failed her as a husband, and that somehow justified her running off to have one with someone else. The mental gymnastics were honestly impressive. I couldn't believe she was trying to put that on me. So I told her, "If you wanted a child that badly, you could have just been honest. You didn't have to lie to me and pretend everything was fine while planning your way out." She didn't have an answer for that. She just stood there, staring at me like I'd hit her with something. But I didn't stop. I told her, "You made that choice on your own. Now you have to live with it. That's not my problem." She made one last attempt. Her expression changed again, back to that sad, pleading look. She told me to think about the child, said I was being unfair by turning my back on him. She was holding the baby in her arms, and she actually tried to use him to guilt-trip me, like I was the bad guy here. But I wasn't falling for it. I told her, I don't know that child. I have nothing to do with him. He's not mine, and neither are you. And that was it. I could see it finally sinking in. She realized I wasn't going to change my mind, that there was no way I was letting her back into my life. The anger on her face started to fade, replaced by something else. Maybe regret, maybe frustration. But it didn't matter. To me, she was just a stranger now. A stranger who tried to walk all over me and expected me to smile and thank her for it. She stood there for a few more seconds, like she was waiting for me to say something, to call her back, to change my mind. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching as it finally clicked for her that I meant every word. Then, without saying anything else, I shut the door. And this time, I didn't wait for her to start banging on it again. I already knew my decision. There was no going back. I walked away from the door feeling different, like I'd finally won. She had spent so much time thinking she could come back and manipulate her way into my life again. But it was over. I was free. There wasn't going to be a second chance. Not for her, not for us. She was just a memory now. One I had finally put where it belonged. In the past. After all those years of guilt and pain, I could finally breathe again. And honestly, it felt good. The moment I closed that door on her, this strange calm came over me. I wasn't angry or sad, or even shocked anymore. It was like all the energy I'd spent on her over the years. The regret, the guilt, the constant wondering just disappeared. I'd finally gotten the closure I didn't even know I needed. And I was ready to move forward. For real this time. Of course, things didn't end as neatly as I hoped. A few days later, I got a text from her mom. She apologized, said she was ashamed of how her daughter handled everything. She told me she tried to talk some sense into her, but clearly, it hadn't worked. Her mom was a good person. She'd been there for me after everything fell apart, and I could tell she was genuinely upset about all of this. I didn't blame her, but I also wasn't about to get pulled back into that situation. So I replied with a simple, polite thanks for checking in, and left it at that. I wasn't going to go into details. I wasn't going to justify my decision. She understood enough. It was over. Over the next few weeks, I started hearing things here and there, from mutual friends, social media, bits of gossip. Apparently, she had moved back in with her parents, and things weren't going well. The guy she left me for, the baby's father, was completely out of the picture. He'd bailed. I guess he wasn't interested in sticking around. So now she was on her own. And from what I heard, she'd burned just about every bridge she had. Most people weren't willing to help her anymore. Even her old friends, the ones who supported me when she first disappeared, had no sympathy left. They'd moved on and didn't want to get dragged back into her drama. Honestly, I couldn't blame them. Her parents weren't in a great position either. They were struggling financially and now had to support both her and a baby. I knew that for sure because not long after her mom texted me, her dad called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. He was polite but very direct. He said they were having a hard time making ends meet and hinted, carefully, that maybe I could help out. He kept mentioning how I used to care about her, how difficult things were, how the baby needed support. I listened, but when he started saying she just needed a little help to get back on her feet, I almost laughed. Not out loud, but you get the idea. I told him, as calmly and respectfully as I could, that her choices were her own, and I wasn't in a position, mentally or otherwise, to help. He got the message. He didn't push any further. Then came the next wave messages from her old friends. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly started reaching out. Some tried to guilt me. They said she was going through a rough time, that maybe I could find it in my heart to give her another chance. One of them even suggested that the child needed a father figure, and that I shouldn't let my bitterness stop me from stepping up. But I didn't budge. Not even a little. I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel guilty for finally choosing myself. I had spent years feeling like I wasn't enough. and I had given that woman everything I had. She threw it away. The least she could do now was live with her decisions, instead of expecting me to fix them. Eventually, the messages stopped. The calls stopped. It was like everyone finally understood that I meant what I said, that I had moved on, and I wasn't going back. And that's when the real peace set in. My life felt quiet, normal, in a way it hadn't felt in years. I had my routine, my friends, my work. It wasn't flashy or perfect, but it was mine. I had rebuilt it on my own terms. And the funny thing was, I started finding happiness in the small things again. Things I hadn't even noticed when I was married. Going for walks, cooking my own meals, reading books I'd been putting off for years. That sense of freedom, it was refreshing. For the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't need anyone's permission to live my life the way I wanted. For once, I wasn't constantly worrying about someone else's approval or happiness. It felt like I was getting my life back, piece by piece. Every now and then, I'd run into someone who knew both of us. They'd ask, "Hey, whatever happened with her?" I'd give a short, polite answer and then change the subject. It wasn't that I was hiding anything. I just didn't want to keep reopening a chapter that was already closed. She was part of my past, and I had finally learned how to leave her there. As for her, the last I heard, things weren't going well. She was struggling to hold down a job, moving between her parents' place and crashing on friends' couches, basically staying wherever she could until she wore out her welcome. People I barely even talked to anymore would message me now and then, saying she was asking for help from just about anyone who would listen. Some even hinted that she was still hoping I'd change my mind, that maybe I'd come around and step in, take her back, even play dad to her child. But that was never going to happen. I'd spent too much time and energy rebuilding my life to even consider going down that road again. I wasn't going to be her safety net. I wasn't going to be the guy who cleaned up the mess just because things didn't go the way she planned. That chapter of my life was over, and nothing was going to pull me back into it. In the end, I got the closure I needed. She made her choices, and now she's living with the consequences. And me? I finally felt free. Not just on the surface, but truly, genuinely free in a way I hadn't felt since the day she left. I wasn't carrying her shadow anymore. I had moved on, and I was content. Not in some big, dramatic, over-the-top way. Just quietly, peacefully content. And honestly, that was enough.